Hello and welcome to AP Macroeconomics with me, Mr. Sanabria. Today's topic is the circular flow model of a market economy. So what we're actually going to do here today is we're going to draw, we're going to draw a picture of the entire economy. So this is macroeconomics, right? We're talking about the entire economy. We're not talking about individual units of the economy, individual households, individual firms or businesses. We're not talking about just what the government does. We're talking about the entire economy, the economy. So today is probably a good time for us to draw what is a very common model that illustrates the entire economy. So all we're going to do is we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to draw a picture and explain what it is. Now, before we even get started, I want you to know that this picture is going to take up probably about half of a sheet of paper. So if you've got your sheet of paper like this right here, okay, I'm going to draw a rough kind of outline of what this is going to look like. Now understand that there's going to be a lot of words in here, so draw your little boxes pretty small. It should be about like this, okay? If you start off with a picture that looks just like this, you're going to have plenty of room to fit in there everything you need to fit, okay? So don't make your boxes too big and use a good half of a sheet of paper. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to draw mine on here. Okay, and you just draw right along with me. And of course, if you need to slow down or speed up, you can just pause the video. So here we go. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with those 4 boxes that I showed you before. Okay, and what we're going to try and do here is we're going to try and split the economy up in a couple of different ways. We're going to try and think about the economy in a few different ways. So the first thing we're going to do, and I may just drop this to write in it because it's going to turn out neater if I do that. On the right, I've written HH. I put HH in the box there, and in the other box I put an F. And let me drop that down a little further. Now I wrote an HH only because I know that HH stands for households. Okay, that is households. That's where you live, that's where I live, that's where people live. That's where individuals live. Those are households. And households are full of consumers. So in the other box, I put an F, and I wrote only an F because I know that F stands for firms. So what's a firm? Well, a firm is just a fancy word for a business. So you've probably heard of the mattress firm. Well, that's a business that sells mattresses. You've probably heard of law firms. Well, those are businesses that sell legal services. So firms, it's just the way that economists say business. Okay, sounds maybe a little fancier. So now let's go ahead and look at our other 2 boxes. What's going to go in there? Well, this is a matter of talking about the economy in terms of markets. Okay, so there is a market for the factors of production. Let's review that real quick. Factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So there's a market for selling those things, right? You sell land. You hear people selling land all the time, like land, acres of land. People go and buy it, but also people sell oil, and people sell water, and all of the other things we talked about that land is, natural resources. People sell labor all the time too, right? You sell your labor if you have a job. Me, I sell my labor for an annual salary. You may have an hourly job where you sell your labor by the hour, right? So you're selling labor all the time. Capital, well, if somebody makes some sort of a capital, like builds a factory, well, then they ended up charging somebody to build it. Or if they sell a factory, they end up making money from selling that factory, right? So a factory is a really easy thing to talk about as far as capital. But what else is capital? Steel rods, right? Because no one wants a steel rod. Steel rod isn't a finished product. It's not a consumer good. But what can you do with a steel rod? Well, you can, turn it into a car frame, or you can build a building with it or something like that. So you've got capital that gets sold. The other thing, if you were going to split all the things that are bought and sold into 2 categories, some are resources, and they are sold in the resource market, and some are products. Some are those finished goods and services. Okay, hamburgers, burritos, cars, You get the point. There's all sorts of goods and services. So those are known as products. And I wrote that pretty small because it has to fit into my little boxes. Okay, but that says resource market up top, and it says product market down below. Okay, so we've got households and firms. We've got businesses and consumers, or producers and consumers. You see how we just split the whole economy up. And then we've got resource market, people buying and selling resources, and we've got products market, people buying and selling products. So now we're going to talk about these things and how they interact with each other. So the first thing I want you to do is, starting from households, I want you to draw a nice big circle with arrows that show that something's going to flow from households through the resource market to firms. And something's going to flow from firms through the products market to households. So we already talked about resources. What are resources? They're the factors of production. So the resource market is the factors of production. And I just put NFOP, factors of production. And let's remind ourselves what they are. They are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So I just put LLCE. That's what I do. So land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship is flowing from households to firms. In a market economy, households own the factors of production. Now, do you think that households just give this stuff to businesses? No, they don't. Do you give your labor resource for free to a business? Absolutely not. You demand what? You demand a paycheck. And so underneath, and wait until you see how I do this. I want you to do it basically the same way. You're going to see that money flows from firms to households in exchange for these things, right? That's what economic activity is. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship is sold to businesses. Now, when a business spends money on labor or capital or something, they call it costs. These are costs, business costs. And when we say costs in this class, we're usually talking about a business cost. And do you think that households consider this a cost? No, they don't. To a household, the money that you get from a business for a factor of production is actually called income. So now we've got costs and we've got income. Okay? Now, what do you think that firms do with all of these resources? What do firms do with land, labor, and capital? They don't just spend their money on it for no reason, right? They're going to turn them into products. You probably guessed that already. And what are products? Well, products are goods and services, and I'm just going to use G and S to signify goods and services. So goods and services are created by businesses using the factors of production, using resources, and they flow over to households. That's who businesses make their goods and services for. They make it for consumers. And do they just give them away? Well, you're already very familiar with the fact that no, businesses don't just give away their products. So money is going to flow. Now we see that we've got a money flow going. Money is flowing from households, and when households spend their money, we don't call it costs. We don't call it costs the same way that we do over here. Households spending money, we've got a specific name, and I want you to know this name, and I want you to use this. This is called consumption spending. This is called consumption spending, right here. Consumption spending or consumer spending, either one is fine, but it's consumption or consumer spending. But it's not called consumption or consumer spending by firms. This is called revenue. That is revenue. Okay? So it's not profit. Let's talk about that for a second. This is revenue. This is all the money coming into a business. All the money that a business makes from selling its stuff is revenue. But why is that different than profits? Well, because profit is revenue minus cost. Because it costs a lot of money to bring those products to the market. They had to make the product, they had to market the product, they had to sell the product and bring it. So there are a lot of costs involved. So you have to subtract how much it costs by how much you made, and then if there's anything left over, that's what profit is. So we got to keep that in mind. Well, let's get back to our model. We have basically outlined a basic economy here. Basically outlined a basic. Well, something we did was pretty basic. But here's the deal. This is pretty incomplete. We should be recognizing right now that there is something major missing from our model. And you might have guessed by now that that is the government. The government is involved in all of this, and I'm just going to put a G in a box right there in the middle, and that is the government. Uncle Sam. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you our model's about to start looking a little more complicated because we're going to fill this middle part in with a lot of inflows and outflows. So the first thing that we probably all realize is that money flows into the government in the form of taxes. Okay, so both households and firms pay taxes. Okay? Households pay taxes and firms pay taxes. So, what do we get for our tax dollars? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? What are we getting for all that money? Well, the first thing is that both businesses and households are getting government goods and services. Those are little goods and services in there if you can't see. Okay, so we've got goods and services that are going to businesses, and we've got goods and services that are going to households. What kind of services? Well, national defense, that's a service, right? That safe feeling that you're enjoying right now, that's because the government spent a lot of money on your security. How about the education you're receiving right now? That is a service. The government spent a lot of money on that service, right? That's where tax dollars go. But then there's some real actual, let's talk about some goods, right? The roads, the infrastructure. These are all government-provided goods. Again, your tax dollars are used to provide these goods and services. And both businesses and households take advantage of these goods and services. So we've got another thing that we want to talk about. And this is going to get a little weird looking because we run out of room, and so I kind of put what looks like a mustache on our thing. Some people think it looks like the Monopoly Man. Other people think it looks kind of like a cat. I'm not sure if it looks like either. But let's talk about each of these. And these are both different. So on the household side, we have something that's called transfer payments. And I'm just going to write the word transfers because my model's getting pretty crowded. So you can see in there, and if you're starting to lose me, it's okay. We can pause and make sure that you're staying with me. But this word right here is transfers. These are government transfer payments. And what a transfer is money that is redistributive in nature, meaning that tax dollars came from some households or businesses, both really, and it just got redistributed out. It wasn't spent on a good or service. It wasn't spent on anything like that. It was something like a social safety net, like Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security, or perhaps veterans benefits. Okay? There's a lot of these transfer payments, food and housing assistance. You get the point, right? So if the government spends money on transfer payments, it's treated a little differently, and we'll figure out why when we start talking about calculating GDP, actually. Then, on the other side, businesses get a kind of transfer as well, and we're going to call that a subsidy. Subsidy. And I'm going to make that plural. So instead of just saying subsidy, I'm going to say subsidies. S-U-B-S-I-D-I-E-S. Government subsidies. Okay? These are usually in the form of tax breaks or tax credits. Okay? It's essentially the same thing. It's money that's just getting redistributed to some businesses or sectors. Okay? So government subsidies. Now, That is how the government interacts with firms over here and households over here. But the government also interacts with the two markets that we have. So let's draw an inflow and an outflow on each side. And I told you we were going to get a little crowded, right? We've got in and out. Okay? We're going to focus on the outflow arrow right now. Let's put a dollar sign there. If the government spends money, it's always called government spending. And I'm just going to put government spending on the top here. Okay? So, right here I just put GS. You could write out government spending if you want. I attempted to down here and it got really sloppy. So that says government spending, but you could just write it out on yours. You're probably using a pencil, not a really big fat marker here. But that's government spending. Now, in the resource market, the government is spending its money on, I hope you guessed, resources, which are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So I just wrote, once again, there we are. I just wrote LLCE, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. That's what the government gets when it spends money in the resource market. For instance, they're paying me for my labor right now. So I represent labor, government spending on labor. The city of Austin is the government we're talking about right now. And then in the products market, the government spends its money on goods and services. Remember, we were just writing G and S for goods and services. This is almost 100% complete. This is awesome. But there's still something missing. There's something actually pretty big that's missing here. And I'm going to tell you that it's so big, I'm going to grab another whiteboard and I'm going to draw a picture of it really quick just to give you a chance to maybe guess what I'm talking about. All right. Yeah, it's the rest of the world. Okay, so the rest of the world, also known as ROW, the rest of the world. So now we've got, let me back up here, the U.S. economy right here. I don't know what hand it was in. You've got the U.S. economy, and it's going to interact with the rest of the world, okay? Some stuff's going to come into the economy from the rest of the world, and some stuff is going to go out of the economy from the rest of the world. Now, the stuff that's coming into our economy from the rest of the world is called imports. And the stuff that's going out to the rest of the world from our economy is called exports. Now let's see if I can actually make this work. I've got my arrows there. Give you a chance to see what they say. They say imports and exports. Look at that. This is fun. U.S. economy, the whole thing, the rest of the world, and we've got imports and exports. Now you can draw your rest of the world a lot smaller than I just drew mine, and just make sure that you have an inflow arrow and an outflow arrow, and that is labeled imports and exports. And that would be the entire circular flow model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and post a nice little PowerPoint slide next to this that has a very clean, nice, typed out version of a circular flow model. You can refer to that if you missed any of this. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you know what the circular flow model is and how you would label all of those inflows and outflows. And it helps if you treat it like something that makes sense. If you kind of walk through the steps the way that we did and you just understand that, yeah, households spend money. They spend money on goods and services, and they make money too. How do they make money? Well, most people work by selling their labor, right? But also maybe they sell land or maybe they sell capital. And you know that businesses buy stuff, right? They purchase labor, they purchase resources, and they use that to turn into products. And when they sell those products, they get revenue. And we know that everybody's paying taxes to the government, and we know that we get goods and services from the government. We probably learned the concept of transfer payments and subsidies today. Okay? And then we also thought a little bit about how the government purchases land, labor, and capital through the resource market, and they purchase goods and services through the products market. And then we kind of finished off talking about how the rest of the world interacts with our economy through imports and exports. And so that is a very simple model of the entire economy. So way to go. We are moving right along in this course. Thanks for tuning in here, and I am Mr. Sanabria. Happy studying, and I will see you next time.